afternoon and welcome to the Easter Seals Project Action webinar, Accessible Transportation and Emergency Preparedness Planning. All participants will be in a listen-only mode. There will be an opportunity to ask questions during today's presentation. At that time, an operator will give instructions on how to ask your questions. If you should need assistance during the conference, please signal an operator by pressing star, then 0 on your touch-tone phone. This conference is being recorded. I would now like to turn the conference over to Christine McLaughlin. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Welcome everyone to today's session on accessible transportation and emergency preparedness planning. Before we begin the session, I want to give you guys a few housekeeping items out of the way. The PowerPoint presentation for today's session can be found on the event website, and that link has been entered into the chat section. So if you'd like to download that PowerPoint, feel free to go ahead and do that. It will remain on the website, so there's no need to do it right this second. You're welcome to go after the event and download that for your records if you want to. The event is being recorded and transcribed. Please visit our website, which is projectaction.org, in about 2 to 3 weeks, and we'll have a copy of that transcript available. If you'd like to receive the copy in Braille or audio CD, you can request that type of format by sending an email to webinars@easterseals.com. That's webinars@easterseals.com. Closed captioning is available for this event. To access the captioning link, you would go to the link that's on the screen, which has also been put into your chat section. Once that closed captioning screen is up, you may want to minimize the screen so that you can see both the captioning and the PowerPoint together, so whatever works for you there. With that, I want to introduce our speakers for today. We have 3 very qualified speakers. The first is Julie Bauman. She's a transit administrator for the City of Fargo, North Dakota. We also have Kevin Shanley, a Senior Emergency Management Coordinator for the City of Chicago, Office of Emergency Management and Communications, and Wright, who is the Senior Director for Easter Seals Accessible Transportation Program. We would like to follow the presentation with questions from you. So following the presentation, we will receive additional instructions from Stephanie on how you can ask your questions to the presenter. So with that, it gives me great pleasure to turn the session over to Carol.
Hi everyone, this is Carol Wright from Easter Seals Project Action. Thank you for joining us today. We're delighted to have you on board. Today's topic is one that I think is of concern to all of us across the country, and depending on where we live, we have different kinds of emergencies that we like to plan for. As we talk about this, I want to start us off with a working definition. First of all, emergency preparedness can be actions that you take to anticipate and minimize the impact of emergency events. Notice the emergency isn't defined here, just the act of being prepared, because we want to be able to think ahead and determine what kinds of emergencies we might be likely to encounter, and by doing that we can be better prepared so it can minimize what happens to us as a result of those emergency events. And then secondly, taking the time to take some planning measures so that we can ensure that our reactions to whatever emergency befalls us is both efficient and effective. Lots of times emergencies come upon us and we react just by flying by the seat of our pants. And if we're really truly doing emergency preparedness, what we're doing is exercising the planning process. One of my favorite quotes comes from Dwight D. Eisenhower. And along with being our president, he of course was a famous general. And one of his quotes was, "In preparing for battle, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." And that's because we never know exactly what circumstances are going to befall us, but by by taking the effort to plan ahead and know exactly what our alternatives might be, we're better prepared for whatever kind of situation might come about. So what are some of the basics of emergency preparedness? Well, the first thing we have to do is understand and we have to know that there are different kinds of threats that are out there for us. An understanding of those types of emergencies that could occur and the related hazards that go along with them are really necessary so that we can have an effective emergency preparedness plan. And then we can also develop policies and procedures to go along with those. In addition, we want to make sure that we're integrating accessible transportation, people with disabilities, and other people who are transit dependent into the planning process. Often these are the very people that are excluded, including transportation. And we want to make sure that all of these people are at the table as we go through the process of getting ready to know what we do to prepare for an emergency. And the third thing is we want to make sure that we can identify all of our available resources. Some of those resources are big resources and they're real easy to identify. Others are small and we may not think of them right away. So it might be things like our vehicles, our staff, and not only our personal staff, but the staff of other programs. Any shelters that are located in the area, community agencies that we would want to be involved with, any funding that might have to come up because there are going to be expenses in any kind of an emergency, backup facilities that we might need to use in terms of operating on them, what kind of communications equipment we should have available to us. It might even be things like generators or things for backup power. It could be things like essential agency records that we want to make sure that we have access to when we need them or that we get them out of harm's way. It can be simple little things like flashlights or batteries or radios of different kinds. Okay? It can be a camera and just documenting what's going on so that when the emergency is over, if you're going to be looking for some assistance, you have some kind of documentation of what's taken place. So resources play a big role in being prepared. Our other two speakers are going to be talking about different kinds of emergencies as well, but let's look at what some of the things are that can happen to us. The first one that we might want to talk about are accidents and incidents. These can be anything from passenger falls, someone getting ill on the bus, a disruptive passenger who actually gets to the point of going beyond being annoying but actually dangerous to other people on the bus. It might be that your vehicle breaks down or that the driver is incapacitated either through a medical emergency or falling asleep at the wheel. It can be things like a vehicle collision or a vehicle rollover. It can be things like a vehicle being immersed in water. And whenever we have these kinds of emergencies, we have to be thinking about what kinds of policies and procedures should we have in place? What kind of training do we need to do? What kind of emergency equipment should we have on hand? And what kind of documentation would we need? The second one on the list is hazardous materials. Another common type of emergency that can happen, we all train for what we do if there are bloodborne pathogens. Do we have a spill kit? Do we know how to clean them up? What are the dangers that are involved? There might be a toxic incident that happens on a vehicle or in one of our facilities. It can be a fuel spill and how we're going to handle it. Or it can go all the way to a much larger scale event like a community evacuation, and that evacuation might be due to a chemical release, radiological release, or it could be due to any other kind of hazardous material emergency. The third one is criminal activity. That can range anywhere from violence or a shooter on a vehicle in a facility, a hostage situation that takes place on a vehicle or in a facility, or an assault on a driver, a passenger, or a person at a bus stop. And so all of those are things that we would want to be prepared for and be thinking about, okay, what would we do in any one of those kind of situations to be prepared? Still another one is if something would happen to our organization's infrastructure. It might be as simple as petty vandalism, trespassing, but it might be real serious and it might deal with theft or burglary or workplace violence that could take place. It might be a vehicle fire, fire at your facility. Does everyone know what to do if there would be a bomb threat that would be called in? Or periodically, we go through these stretches where we have scares through dangerous mail. Any of those kinds of things might be things that damage our organization infrastructure. We can also have organization infrastructure that gets destroyed because of other kinds of weather type emergencies, which I'll be talking about a little later, and so will our other speakers. The fifth kind is domestic or international terrorism. And I think sometimes when we think of emergencies, people's minds go to that, and we know that that's probably not as common. Although when we look at some of the situations that have happened across the country more recently, it's becoming more of an issue, and it doesn't necessarily have to just be in the big cities. Domestic or international terrorism can range from improvised explosive devices that are set off somewhere. It can also be chemical, biological, or radiological releases, and just types of things that I think we shouldn't get too complacent and think, well, it could never happen here. Lastly, acts of nature or severe weather. And depending on the part of the country you live in, you might have one or more of these that you deal with on a regular basis. Certainly, we hear about floods, and you don't have to listen to the news for very long these days, and we know what's going on in Colorado. Parts of our country every year deal with blizzards, ice storms, winter weather. Certainly we have our tornado belt and lots of places that deal with tornadoes on a regular basis, and we have tornadoes that hit in places that we don't typically see them. It can range from severe thunderstorms to, if you live in certain parts of the country, hurricanes that come along. We can have windstorms, earthquakes, fires, landslides, mudslides, rock slides, or giant sinkholes that develop. And all of these, depending on where you're at in the country, are acts of nature that we have to be prepared for, and that we should have plans in place of knowing how we would handle those emergencies. It's not only us that we have to be thinking of, because we're not the only ones in our communities or elsewhere preparing for emergencies. Many other organizations are also preparing for emergency events, just like you are, but not all of them are thinking from the same point of view. And that's why it's really important that we begin to integrate transit into the local emergency community, and how can we all work together so that all points of view are considered, because when we do that, we are actually much better prepared for whatever emergency comes along. So when we talk about local emergency management, we want to know who's involved in the community emergency preparedness planning. You need to know, is your agency currently involved? If not, why not? And if you aren't, how can you get involved? And Kevin will talk about that more as well. What's expected of transit? Have people with disabilities and other transit-dependent people been represented all the way back to the planning process? And then are emergency service agreements in place so that things are ready to go? All of us leads us to two things that can make a real difference in the planning process, especially as it deals with accessibility. One is that when we have inclusive conversations and extensive outreach, people with disabilities and other people who are transit dependent can ensure that they know what those transportation options are going to be during an emergency. And then the communities can make sure that they're aware of the different needs of transit dependent people in their communities and locations of the homes of people with disabilities should evacuations be necessary. Finally, what we want to do is look at what are some of our potentially accessible transportation resources and build a database out there so that we know who could be called on in case of an emergency. It might be local school districts with lift-equipped buses, community emergency medical vehicles like ambulances, vans or buses from places of worship, local assisted living facilities, local community and public transit vehicles, paratransit vehicles, area agencies on aging and senior citizen center vehicles. Some areas have accessible taxis. Other areas might have adult daycare vehicles. And depending on the size of your community, there might be airport car rental shuttle buses or just airport shuttle buses. Accessible transportation should be identified and described in a city's emergency preparedness plan, and you should all know what your role is and how it can contribute to that emergency preparedness planning. Obviously, Easter Seals Project Action feels really strongly that people with disabilities need to be involved in the planning meetings. And then if an emergency occurs and we get to the point where an evacuation is necessary for your community, then the city can confidently tap into all of its resources because we all know that they've been identified. That's just kind of an overview of the whole picture, and our next speakers are going to be able to come on board and give you a lot more of the specifics from their personal experience background. So Kevin, I turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Julie, and I'd like to thank Easter Seals for inviting me to participate in this, and I'd also like to thank the folks who have joined in to learn a little bit more about the challenges that we face. I'd like to say right at the outset that this particular the topic for this webinar is really it reflects my passion for emergency management, but more so it reflects the passion for addressing people with disabilities and how the emergency management community can best recognize and find solutions for the many issues. So on slide 1, I talk about the need for participatory planning. I put this slide first because really very little could be accomplished in helping people with disabilities unless you implement inclusive planning. And as we know, disability issues impact every aspect of emergency management. We often talk about the phases of emergency management, and those phases are planning, responding, recovering, and mitigating the effects of a disaster on the community. Now, historically, I gained my, I guess, my experience, the best way to put it, in Florida. And I had a very good trainer, and it was Craig Fugate, as a matter of fact, who now, of course, heads up FEMA. But historically, we have seen that emergency managers were really not able to recognize or understand how to best work with and assist people with disabilities. This was way back in the 90s when you had Hurricane Andrew, and evacuation plans were very preliminary or sometimes shoddy at best. And people were really scratching their heads around the table. I can remember going to a number of planning sessions in the state EOC, and they knew that there were a number of people with disabilities in the community, but they really weren't in tune with what those needs might be. The equipment back then was a little more simple, you might say. You might have an oxygen tank that someone might bring with them, or perhaps they have wheelchairs or something in that area. But now it's become very complex, and transporting someone with a lot of the medical devices that they have has become a real issue. I say that the emergency managers in recent years have been a little bit on the outside looking in terms of emergency management and disabilities. I note that there's a great improvement, however, and some of this as a result of federal legislation that was passed in the 70s and then after Hurricane Katrina. And that's the Stafford Act, an emergency management act that actually creates the Emergency Management Agency, but also provides the authority to enact such funding programs as individual assistance and public assistance. If a hurricane comes in and you need assistance in the community to repair a road or infrastructure, you can get public assistance. If your family is in need of some assistance, including people with disabilities and their needs in those families, then individual assistance is something that you would find. Katrina, we don't have to go into that. We all know, we all remember what I consider to be a very telling photo, and that was the photo of all the school buses that were underwater in the parking lot. And you'll remember that there were many questions about transportation and evacuation. How was it that all these people remained in town? And then you take a look at a picture like that, and it's a little bit easier to understand. So a lot of those concerns, social vulnerability issues, equal access, all of those have been addressed, at least preliminarily, in these two actions, federal actions, and of course the states and cities have enacted legislation as well, ordinances and so on. The one thing I do want to say, though, is we're not just planning for hurricanes in the East Coast or the Gulf Coast or earthquakes in the New Madrid Belt or rock slides and fires in the West. As planners, we have to sit together and think about things happening that we would never have even thought of before, like 9/11. No one ever really considered what would happen in a case like that. The weather is very extreme. I don't know that anybody could have predicted a storm like Sandy that's still having a terrible effect on the Jersey Shore. You look at Newtown. Who could have thought that so many children would be killed by someone with mental illness? And then they have Colorado, and so the thing I'm trying to convey is that things are happening that we haven't experienced before. It's not only weather; it's it might be criminal activities like we saw in D.C. on Tuesday. So we want to make sure that when we sit at the table as emergency managers, planners, and representatives of the disability community, that we address the concerns and unique needs and make sure that these needs are fully integrated into the phases of emergency management that I mentioned earlier, which is prepare for, respond to, recover from, and mitigate disasters and catastrophes. So I'm going to take a sip of water. One thing before I get off of this first slide, I want to mention that the emergency management community has really made some progress in the last few years. I happen to be an assessor with the Emergency Management Accreditation Program, which is EMAP. And EMAP is tasked with reviewing plans of agencies, whether it be a city or a county or a state. And now they're actually going into colleges to assess emergency management plans and determine whether they should be accredited. This has been going on for about 2 or 3 years. Boston was just accredited about a year ago. And I bring this up because they're trying to professionalize the industry, of course, but they're also ensuring that many of the topics in emergency management are addressed. In other words, when we go into assess a plan, we're looking for what that city, county, or state intends to do about people with disabilities, given the number of hazards that Julie talked about. She listed all those hazards. Well, we go a step farther. Who will be impacted by these types of events? And all of that has to be spelled out in a plan, an emergency management plan, or they'll eventually be accredited, but it's going to take some time. They have to go back to the desk and work on it some more. Let me see, slide 2, if I can, with my computer wizardry, which is benefits of participation to emergency planners. Well, let's see, let's go back one. Know your emergency planning office and help them get to know you. I laughed. I heard Julie mention that, and that is so important. If you don't get anything out of my presentation today, I think the important thing is that we need to sit at the table. You need to know the transit industry, transportation industry, non-governmental organizations, contract carriers, buses. You need to sit at the table with the emergency management people. You need to know who in your county or your city or your state is in charge of transportation. Now, in a lot of areas, a lot of cities and states, they go by an ESF system, which is essential support function, emergency support function. And ESF 3 oftentimes is transportation. So you want to get together with them, and also ESF 8, which happens to be health. And then there are other support functions as well that come into play. But you certainly have to know. The time is now. The emergency management community now recognizes its responsibility to coordinate planning. And then to add to that, funding has been flowing in recent years. So not only do you get to meet and know your emergency management liaison in the community, but that person can also help you with availability of money down the road. Benefits of participation to emergency planners. I think there are a number of solutions that can enhance it. I hope you'll agree with most of them. I'd say most of them are being followed through, even today in Chicago with the Mayor's Office of Disabilities. The first one I'm interested in is disability issues actually impact every aspect of emergency management, as we discussed, and therefore they should be incorporated and integrated into all phases, plans, response systems, and long-term recovery efforts in the industry. Long-term recovery is becoming the latest, I don't want to say buzzword, but it's the latest source of focus, I think. When you look at disasters like Sandy and some of the fires out west, you realize that the recovery process isn't necessarily the week after the disaster, but something that can last many months or even many years. And they just closed out the Hurricane Andrew funding sources just last year, and that storm happened in '92. I think we should have the partnership approach to preparedness efforts and joint planning with emergency managers and disability organizations both at the planning table. I don't see any other way. It's something that's maybe held us back in the past. I mean, we're all people, all of us on this call that want to help people. And it just so happens that the best way to do that, I think, is through the face-to-face contact. You can tell us as subject matter experts what your concerns are, given the various types of cognitive or mobility. Whatever the issue is, you have the power to tell us what should be done. I don't think we should be sitting in a room with emergency planners, as has happened to me in the past, and you say, well, gee, we need some transportation. There's going to be an evacuation, and not really fully understand the types of issues that people are having. So I think that's critical, and that's why I've repeated it several times. Include a person with a disability or disability background in the Emergency Operations Center. Not only should they be involved in the planning process, but it's also helpful for them to be a liaison or representative when the EOC is activated, because we are dealing with people with disabilities, and these questions come up all the time now. We have the Red Cross there, we have the ESF-8, the health people there, we have the transportation people. But again, a representative from an NGO or an organization dealing with disabilities, I think, is critical, and it will really help the process along. I'm going to flip the page here. Continuing on that same note, the insight gained through working side by side with people with disabilities during the plan development process will enhance everyone's understanding of the plan's purpose. So what can organizations and emergency management agencies do? There are service providers in the disability community who are key contacts for actions prior to, during, and after a disaster. They work directly with the disability populations, and they have the best knowledge about the needs of the community and have established and maintained trusted relationships. And I mentioned trusted relationships because that is a major part of emergency management today. The fact that you need to have some credibility, and so that people can actually trust what it is you have to say. So if you're conducting meetings at a state EOC before hurricane season, and you're not including anyone from the disability community, I don't know how much credibility you would have. And that's not something that you want to kind of undermine during a disaster situation. Emergency management planners, we rely on service providers to assist with identifying populations, conducting needs assessments, as Julie mentioned, coordinating resources, and if all possible, enhancing everyday services. Plan to provide assistance to individuals with disabilities and others with access and functional needs who are not institutionalized. Starts with simple but crucial information. Who are they? Where are they? How can they be contacted? And what assistance might they require? In Florida, we started a registry program years ago because we need to know. We need to have at least a ballpark figure of where our communities are. There might be elderly housing. There might be nursing homes or any types of facilities, care facilities. We need to know where those are. And we also need to know if there are other pockets of socially vulnerable communities. And in Florida, we did the registration. I think registration has been kind of a 50-50 deal. It's gaining more and more support, I believe. But HIPAA has dominated that in many jurisdictions. The fact that people are a little nervous to give out any information, even though they might only ask for their name and where they live. But I think that's changing, and I expect that to become a national what would be the word I'm looking for? Be a national effort. A program to assess and support the needs of persons with special needs can be considered that would involve multiple search and self-registration, a public awareness campaign, and community involvement. The program could potentially yield a much more complete inventory of those individuals with disabilities and others with access and functional needs residing in the community. Next slide, role of transit. I don't have that much here, and the reason for that is because we haven't had that kind of interaction that we need so far. However, going back to my last statement about getting the numbers and basically identify within the community where there are pockets of socially vulnerable people, emergency planners should consider the demographic composition of the community, as well as the transportation necessary for evacuation and the capacity to provide shelters that satisfy the range and needs that exist for people with disabilities. Issues such as personal assistance devices, service animals, supplies, equipment, help, and support of family members, friends, pets, other directly employed aides are critical to many with disabilities. And I don't have to tell you that, preaching to the choir. Another concept, the demands of multiple trip and long distance travel can be particularly challenging for some, physically and mentally. Emergency managers should look to designate and advertise staging areas for long distance transportation and provide additional transportation in the form of over-the-road buses or school buses to shelter locations. And then, of course, there are the evacuation considerations. Depending upon the emergency, disaster, or catastrophe, and risk-benefit decision-making, individuals requiring acute care will evacuate 24 hours before the general population now. This is something I still see in plans, and I'm not sure if any tweaks will be made to that, but the thinking is 24 hours before. That provides an opportunity to free some of the roads up, I believe, and we'll see what happens with that. Planning for transportation for people with disabilities may include any number of additional needs. The oxygen, medically fragile, someone who cannot travel without an attendant or family member. Those are all issues that we in the emergency management community are looking at. Finally, communications and notification. And I'll end with this. Effective communication. Along with the slide one, which I said, well, this represents everything, because you can't accomplish anything unless you have those aspects addressed. You can't actually implement the plan effectively unless you communicate with the community. So people with disabilities must be given information that is comparable in content and detailed to that given to the general public. Must be accessible, understandable, and timely. Standard methods of communicating emergency management information, whether through mainstream media or through notifications such as sirens, alarms, reverse 911, and whether operated by local jurisdictions, building owners, or other entities are falling short of providing information in multiple accessible formats. But again, that's being worked on, and we're bringing in people from your community to help us with that. The unique circumstances of some people with disabilities make it likely that they will not receive emergency communications in a timely manner. The chances of contacting these often difficult to reach individuals can be involved, once again, by involving organizations working with disability community, service providers, and community groups. The bottom line here, it is essential to utilize multiple redundant channels and alternate methodologies for alerting populations to the emergency. Outreach to people with disabilities must be conducted during the preparedness, recovery, response, and mitigation phases, since they are likely to receive incomplete or no information about plans otherwise. What we do here in Chicago and what we were doing in Boston, we have the community emergency response teams are searched for door-to-door to senior centers and to other formal and informal gathering places. And these teams are composed of staff members from emergency management agencies, first responders, service responders, service providers, rather, voluntary organizations, and others well informed about the needs of people with disabilities. And I think that pretty much wraps it up for me at this point. I'll be happy to take questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. This is Julie Bauman. I'm the City of Fargo Transit Administrator. And even though Kevin probably represents the much larger urbans, I'm more of a small urban, there's no question about that, but we do have quite a bit of experience here with, unfortunately, floods and things along those lines. So I thought that it would be good to share just some of the practical things that we have done and some of the, as Kevin said too, redundancies that we've built in so that we can best reach out and communicate to transit riders, people that are transit dependent, people with disabilities, and just the community in general to keep them apprised of what we're doing and what best we can do to help them. So with that, I'm going to move ahead. Again, like Carol talked about initially, what is the emergency? And I feel even though we had a lot of experience with flood here, that it was important to address a few other emergencies that I would assume all of us have faced at one time or another. Safety and security is always something that we want to be cognizant of with our transit situation. You always have to be aware of what's going on around you. Your drivers have to be trained very well, and hopefully that's the case with all the agencies we're talking with today. Vehicle issues, fires, we've faced those. Breakdowns, I think everybody's had those. And of course weather-related emergencies, including floods. And what we want to do is identify ahead of time events that we think would be applicable to our area. I think the events I covered would probably suit almost everyone except the snow, the blizzards. That doesn't apply to all of you, but it certainly applies up here. And where Kevin's now in Chicago too. We have, I have myself, and I'm sure many of you participated in the NIMS training, National Incident Management System training. If you have not had the opportunity, I would strongly recommend it because it sends the loud and clear message about incident command and how to follow through with those details and how the structure works, and it's very valuable training. When we initially went through some of our events, none of us had that training. Had we had it, I think things would have gone much smoother, so I definitely would recommend that. Driver and staff training, we have monthly safety meetings. We pick subjects that are things that either have happened, that we have heard of other agencies having had happened, and just a general safety. We emphasize safety constantly. And of course, for people with disabilities, that goes even further. So we hold a separate meeting with our paratransit providers and drivers to emphasize those issues specifically. Bring in outside speakers and trainers. Bring in the experts. We do that on a lot of occasions, and it's very, very valuable. We've had police departments, we've had our emergency managers come in and talk that would be more along the lines of what Kevin does. And we've had people from the disability community come in and give presentations, and they're fabulous. And our drivers love it, and they learn all kinds of things from these people. We participate in tabletop exercises that the emergency management people here put on. And I belong actually on that particular panel, and we have learned some valuable things with the tabletop exercises. Take advantage of any vendor training that you have. We've had vendors come in that give us lift training for our lift-equipped vehicles, which of course all of ours are. Safety equipment, anything along those lines. Keep up on the latest and greatest because the industry is in touch and has definitely come full circle since I started here 16 years ago as to what they can provide to help us with our missions. Data collection right up front is very, very important. You want to identify and plan ahead any of your staff and employee responsibilities. You don't want people running around not knowing what their level of involvement is going to be, where they're going to be stationed, what they're supposed to know. So definitely plan ahead for that. And that's not just in the face of, we have a flood coming, let's get together. Do it on a regular basis. Have a telephone calling tree, which we have in place. And we update it semi-annually so that we know, people's phone numbers, email addresses, all of that, they change. We update it, we distribute it, we want to make sure that we can get in touch with everybody at a moment's notice. And so far it's worked pretty well for us. Now again, we did not have any of this in place prior to our flood experience in 2009. We want to provide backup contacts. Let's say we can't get a hold of the general manager. We want to get a hold of a supervisor in place of that person. Have all of that information and make sure that you have it at home and that you can have it in your wallet or whatever you carry with you, because you may not be at a location where you expect to need this information. So have it. What we do actually is we have it printed and we hang it on our lanyards that we wear. Also, we want to make sure that we keep our vehicles maintained and fueled, so all of our mechanics are on our list as well. And again, with the redundancies. If your facility is located, and your transit facility is located in an area that is there's potential for a flood, you're not on high ground, identify alternative locations so you can keep your operations going if necessary. Keep your drivers and operations managers well informed and keep them in the process and put them in the process immediately so that they can work with their employees ahead of time too. And all of you out there that recognize FTA know that you should have an inventory anyway of your equipment. Now the main thing that we learned was that even though FTA requires us to keep inventory, on my inventory list I didn't have some of this information, like a fuel source. That's CNG, that's biodiesel, that's diesel, that's gas. What type of a vehicle is that? Because if you're taking people and evacuating them and you're leaving the area and all you've got is CNG vehicles, you may not come upon another CNG fueling station that you're allowed to fuel at or even that exists. So you want to make sure ahead of time that you know all of these things, your seating capacities, your wheelchair capacities, fuel source again, vehicle size, what do I have available to me to respond to this emergency? Pardon me, a little sore throat there. On your facility inventory, again, and this is all ahead of time and planning, identify and make arrangements if your storage and fueling facility is in the line of where the emergency is going to happen. It just so happens our facility is fairly new and we're on higher ground here, so we were okay. However, we decided to move many of our vehicles out of this area because there was higher ground available for us to operate out of if we needed to. We went so far as to identify individually drivers that lived close and could reach the facility, make sure that there's things you don't think of. These people are showing up, they're there to help. You want to make sure you're in areas that are accessible to everyone that's coming in. Communication, like Carol was saying, is the live-all, end-all, and Kevin's slide, I think, summed it all up. You have to be able to communicate. If you don't have that, you are really putting yourself at risk, because there are people out there and you need to be able to be in touch with them as often as possible. We had some of this information is related to the 2009 flood specifically. We discovered that we were all handing out our personal cell phones because we discovered that we didn't have anything that could go long distance. So if you were in a bus and when we were evacuating and some of the trips were 2 hours round trip, one way, we had no way of communicating with those guys. Your radios don't reach that far. So we were handing out cell phones for long distance travel. We were scraping and scrimping to find that information. Have current maps available And we always publish on our website, especially coming up this time of year, storm tips and procedures so that people know ahead of time what to expect from our agency. And we are the local transit provider here in Fargo. We have rider alerts. We have the website, Twitter, Facebook. I am fortunate to have a young man on my staff who's very tech savvy with that stuff. And even if you don't have someone that's tech savvy, there's very simple ways of doing these very similar things. Websites, you can hire companies, just very simple basics. But think about reaching people with disabilities and what that takes on a website. Make sure that everything, all the information you put out there is accessible for people with disabilities. We have several folks that live here in the area that we communicate with through email and such because they are nonverbal, so it's easier for them to do it that way. So they sign up for our rider alerts and they get all the information and firsthand, and it's very, very helpful for them. We here on our fixed route have predetermined and pre-published snow routes because we have areas that are impassable in the winter. And so we warn people ahead of time what to expect, where we'll be going and what we'll be doing. People with disabilities on our paratransit service, we communicate probably even more frequently with them, I would say. I have a mobility manager, and she's very good about reaching out to that community and really educating them on expectations during these events. We do registration through self-identification, and we started that, thank heavens, prior to the 2009 flood. And we had everyone at least that's affiliated with our service on our list of pre-registration. And granted that, of course, was not everyone out there because not everyone needs our service. But it was certainly a very good starting point, and we had a lot of good information. One of the things we discovered, too, was our phone messages. Something that simple. If you don't keep your phone messages updated, especially in the event of an emergency, people don't know what to expect. They call in, your staff is busy, they're running hither-thither, and you don't have your phone message up to date. Something that simple. It just, keep that in mind. That could eliminate a lot of calls and interruptions. You could we put out messages we put a new message on every day so we can tell people about what's going on, and if there is anything that we're going to be diverting or anything service we're not going to be providing. As far as safety goes, we have drivers that are certified by Red Cross, first aid, CPR. We do have, like Carol mentioned, first aid biohazard kits on the vehicle. Unfortunately, we've had frequent experience with that stuff. It's just the nature of the business. And our drivers are very good about it. They're well trained. We do treat all bodily fluids as infected. So we have a local company that does strictly biohazard cleanup. We have utilized him frequently and brought him in to do that type of stuff. As far as I know, he's the only one in the area that does that for us, but he's on board with us. In a collision, this particular collision that you see here happened where, and you'll notice it's on the passenger side. This individual was intoxicated, came up rear end of the bus, and went around the side that is the passenger side. Unfortunately, they did hit a person getting off of the bus at the time, but our driver was well prepared. She checked and secured the vehicle, notified dispatch of the injuries that had occurred, gathered all the witness information. And we always tell our drivers, you assist authorities no matter what, and there's certain protocols that they have to follow as well. We follow their lead, certainly, and we do not talk to the media unless we have a spokesperson there from our organization. Onboard equipment, Carol touched on that a little bit. Again, we keep all of this stuff on every one of our vehicles, and of course on Paratransit as well. In fact, unfortunately, at times we use it more in those situations that are unexpected with people with disabilities that that require extra attention from us. Security, Kevin can probably speak much more to this than I can, but we are very cognizant of security in our facilities, which include our shelters. We have 2 major transit facilities here, and of course all of our vehicles. We train in identifying suspicious packages and devices, in fact, I just installed several new card readers in our facilities. We were having some issues with people getting into the facility that should not be in here, but there's a lot of good information out there for training on security, which I think some of the larger agencies is extremely important. But even in our smaller urbans and rurals, we've experienced that type of stuff too. We've had several incidents that have been security related. With snow, again, like I was saying, we have a shorter fixed route. Mostly, we just want to get as many people where they're going as safely as possible. So we want to make people aware ahead of time that we will not be running in certain areas, and we focus very, very heavily here, again, like I said, on safety. And we do pre-print all of this and make it available to everyone so that they're aware well ahead of time of what we'll be doing. Tornadoes, unfortunately, we have dealt with tornadoes in this area, not nearly as frequently as some in other areas. But we do have protocols in place. We have designated shelter locations, but we are very realistic that we likely will not make it to the designated shelter locations. And so we train the drivers on what to do if they experience a situation like this. Again, it's about safety. We have had, unfortunately, 2 fire situations. The main thing that we always focus on is evacuate the vehicle immediately. And when you have people with disabilities and their immobility devices and they're tied down and they're secured, it's very important you have that web cutter, the belt cutters right where they're very accessible, and you can immediately get people out as quickly as possible. I'm sure you've all seen the videos of how fast a vehicle can go up. And what we learned during one of our fires, and it was the strangest thing, but it was an education for us. We learned that the radio became disabled immediately when the fire kicked in. We have since put in measures that have assisted with that, where the radio will continue to work for an additional 15 minutes if we're lucky, if we're in a situation where the fire is contained to the rear area like it was in that particular case. But that was a surprise to us, so we learned on that. And we do train, again, our drivers, and even with the new fire suppression systems in our vehicles, what we have discovered is we have several hybrid buses. They're diesel electric. What we have learned with the fire suppression systems is that even though they're in the vehicles, they do not apply to the part on top where the batteries are. It's only for the internal part of the vehicle like they would be on a normal vehicle. So that was something that we were not aware of until we got our last 4 40-footers. For real life experience on our flood, I don't know how many of you watched us on the news, but in 2009 we did experience a major catastrophe in the form of a flood. And since then we've done more what I would consider event preparation. Thank heavens, because if we go through another 2009, I don't know how we're going to do that. When 2009, the forecast came out that it was possibly going to be a flood, but it very quickly turned to it's definitely going to be a flood. What magnitude is it going to be? We're not sure. So we had to start planning, and we didn't have real long to plan for it. But we included all of the management staff and our engineering department, because we're part of the city structure here. Engineering department identified areas that needed to be shored up, and city maps were distributed, and then we here in transit developed the plans to limit fixed route and paratransit service, both. We weren't sure at that point what was going to happen. We had no idea of the magnitude of the event coming towards us. With Paratransit, we had lists of names and phone numbers of our riders, and again, we have to be very cognizant of HIPAA, and I know that that's being worked on as we speak. So we didn't provide any of this information to anyone outside our agency. We had our local MPO map where all these paratransit riders were located. So all you saw was a map with dots on it, and if we needed further information, then that had to come through us. So we asked our residential providers to transport their clients whenever possible. And of course, their clients are all people with disabilities, be it cognitive or physical. They're taking care of a whole variety of people. And we asked our riders to voluntarily limit their rides. Now, normally with paratransit, of course, you can't do anything like that. But in the event of an emergency like this, and by then the governor had declared, or I'm sorry, the governor and the president both had declared an emergency. So you get to the point where kind of all bets are off, and you really have to look at what you can safely do and what really needs to be done. And so we had great cooperation from our riders. They were wonderful to work with. They understood the situation. And then the other piece was we had to start contacting private transportation providers, because I ended up at a meeting where during the initial planning phase, where I discovered that we were going to be the solution for every one of the nursing homes here in town. They all planned on just calling us. Well, I don't have that many vehicles, and there was no way I could have met that need. So that at that point, we were in kind of a pickle because we didn't have access to vehicles that we needed in quantity. So the private transportation providers were contacted, and we did up agreements with them very quickly. And we have since kept up with those agreements. And you learn a lot of this on the fly. This picture here on the next slide, where it says flood experience, weather affecting mobility, we had, it was rain, lots of rain, torrential rain. And then there was a blizzard, and then it rained again, and then there was another blizzard. It was horrible. I can't really even describe it, and you can't unless you experience it. But this is just one of the volunteer lines that was out on the front line, and we snapped a shot of these people working very hard. It was all volunteers. Keep that in mind, that did this. And you always want to encourage travel restrictions if possible. We did do that. That was in conjunction with the mayor's announcements. Every day we'd have a press conference. And we sit right on the border with Minnesota up here. And normally there's a couple of ways to get over to Minnesota, but by this point the river had raised so high that there was only one bridge they could keep open. We did as much as we could with our fixed routes, detouring around flooded areas. And we canceled only one time for one day during this whole event. Of course, we modified several of our routes, but we kept as much service out there as we could, because from our thinking, it was those are fewer vehicles on the road. If we can keep people out of their vehicles and put them on a bus, then that's the way to do it. The Highway Patrol did end up closing all the interstates coming in and out of our area. I was included in the Emergency Operations Center, which is, for us, it's located at our public safety building. And that really made all the difference in the world up front. And like Kevin was saying, people with disabilities have to be represented at the table. And they weren't in this particular situation. I was the only one that would be the person that was representing them. And all along we have had good relationships with our providers here and all of our agencies, and that clearly that relationship building paid off in the long run, because I felt I was able to represent the community of people with disabilities at least as best I could at the table up there. And we had, I just wanted to point out this picture up here. We have a local place called the Fargo Dome, holds about 19,000 people, and this picture is of one of the sandbag making location operations we had going in 2009. keep in mind back then we had, these were all being filled by hand, so it was quite to do. One of the main things you're going to learn if you take the NIMS and the ICS training is you want to funnel all of your public information through one source. And we had several different people that thought they were the one source. Long-term lesson, have your press releases issued by one public information officer. It will definitely help you in the long run. In 2009, again, we had to bring in additional staff and drivers. We're about 2 hours from Minneapolis, 2.5 hours, and they sent us a bunch of extra drivers and relief help, thank heaven. So, however, during the 2009 flood, we did evacuate the nursing homes here in Fargo and one of the hospitals. We have 2 hospitals here. And so it was the first time we had that experience. I would never want to go through that again, and I would never want to put the people in the nursing homes through that experience again. Moorhead is our sister city right next to us in Minnesota. They did evacuate over there. And again, the Fargo nursing homes, we evacuated over 5,000 residents from there. Ambulances, we used buses. They flew in some special planes to help these people. When we evacuated the hospital, it was quite a thing. We were working in conjunction with our local, it's our public health organization here. And once we partnered up with them and they knew that we had all the information, we had more information, it turns out, than they had about people with disabilities in the community. So we worked very, very closely with them to help arrange all of this. A couple of pointers I would have if you're going to participate in the evacuation: make sure that people understand ahead of time what you actually have available and be realistic about it. Be honest about what buses you have, how many can they have to take out of town, how many drivers you have, and how long are the trips, and are there fueling sites off-site, and all of those things. Make sure that you take all of that into consideration, because we were standing there looking at each other at, it was about 2 in the morning, saying, how can we send these guys out of town? It was a blizzard, and we had no fuel cards to send with them. So we were sending our personal credit cards with them because they're going to be having to fuel the vehicles. One of the things that came up during the nursing home evacuations was the residents, of course, most of them require medication, or they may have special needs with oxygen tanks and things like that, assistive devices. But what they did was they grabbed pillowcases and put the resident's name on the pillowcase with their information on it, and then their medications inside that. I would make one suggestion to that: if you're ever involved in an evacuation, make sure it's a plastic bag of some sort, if possible, because the pillowcases, though they worked very well, they got pretty wet on the vehicle because we had so many people tracking in and out of there. But keep in mind, too, that these people are very vulnerable and they're scared, and you want to do everything you can to make sure that you give them as much reassurance as possible that everything's going to be okay and that you're there to help them. And that made a lot of difference. We had some great drivers doing that. Again, on the flood experience, Metro Transit Garage, that's just what we call my facility here that I'm located at. It's about 55,000 square feet. We became one of the main points where we had stored sandbags. Any of you that have had experience with sandbags, you can't set them out on a dike if they're already frozen, so you have to keep them thawed out until you use them. So we were bringing in, by the semi-loads, into my facility, which has a heated floor, which is what a picture there is. And then we took my buses that we weren't going to be using and moved them to, like I said, higher ground earlier in the presentation. So it was quite a sight to look there and see all these sandbags there. And this is, we had paratransit buses, again, for people with disabilities, staged and ready to go for emergency evacuation. The one issue I ran into during this that you might want to take into consideration is that we had, we here have our fueling station inside our facility, which in some cases I know that I had a person that did not want to leave the people on the paratransit vehicle while it was being fueled. And I had to get special dispensation to do that from the governor's office. So we did do that though. And we brought people through and we had to fuel. And what ended up happening was there was a 6-hour delay and people were sitting on the bus that long, and so we were ready to run out of fuel. My facility also has showers and locker rooms, which was very helpful. We had truck drivers, National Guard, police department here, and this one little picture here with a little escort, little Jack Russell Terrier. The drivers didn't really have much to do in between what was going on. Again, up at the EOC, Emergency Operations Center, this is just some of the local staff here. This is a list of people that were involved at the EOC. And transit was at the table. We were treated well. We were good partners with everybody. We tried to do everything we could to help. Granted, we couldn't give them everything they wanted because, again, they all expected that it would be just us doing the evacuation. So there was a lot of calling going on to get assistance from other providers. Again, we had a great partnership with the health department, and that made all the difference in the world to get assistance to people with disabilities. We had just some real simple lessons learned. We did manage to distribute a lot of volunteers to neighborhood sites. We took up residents in a couple of off-site locations because they were closer to the neighborhoods. So we had designated parking areas, and we called it Sandbag Central here. That's where the main function was when people were making sandbags. But what happened in 2009 is the waters were coming and rising so fast, we had to set up remote locations right in the neighborhood, and they were making sandbags while they were standing out in the middle of the storms that were going on. Another thing is to keep in mind volunteers. People with disabilities, there's a lot of them that I know here in my community that love to help, and they're not able to go out and lay down a sandbag, but they're sure able to help on the phone, and they're able to help with a lot of things. So, I mean, they love being included, and they're just like everybody else. They want to help to the best of their ability. Include them up front. It's well worth it. It pays off in the long run. This is just a statistic, or some statistics, I should say, of the miles we drove just during 2009 and passengers that we transported. And that's a picture of, I don't know if any of you know of Hesco Dike, but that's, they open that up and fill it up with sand and instead of laying down sandbags. And on the next slide it shows we made 3.5 million sandbags for Fargo. And you see how they're protecting them with the tarp there. Again, you don't want those things to freeze on you before they're all laid down. And we had 48 miles of protection that particular year. And keep in mind, most of those, the minimum height that we had to put up was 40 feet to keep that river back. It was something to see, and frankly, I never want to see it again. Again, lessons learned. We learned that you have not only people out in the field, so to speak, that are helping you out, but make sure that at the EOC you have radios to be in contact with your people. We pre-programmed all the buses so we were ready when it happened. Make sure you take your rechargers and you've got spares. Telephone communications. Be aware that your cellular stuff may not be working during an emergency. So you want to make sure that if you have any redundancy of any kind for communications, you put that in there. What we ran into a lot of was people that wanted to return. We gave out posters and handouts with our information on them. Site management at remote locations, was very, very helpful. We wanted to make sure that if you keep cars and stuff out of your area, that's what you want to do. So we had our engineering, we put up no parking signs, and we had different bus routes to take. Again, volunteers, and I know we're coming to the end of the presentation, so I apologize if I'm going a little fast, but you want to be aware of, one of the main things I want to touch on too is some of the waiting areas and some of the things that you have to be aware of. we only had one site here that was for people with disabilities that would be a staging area, and all the other locations it was for people that that did not have disabilities. So plan ahead of time that you can get people to where they're going, to make sure you're going to the right location. Again, what I learned was with the size and height of vehicles is that school buses can go into a lot higher ground than our main transit vehicles could. So we had school buses. At that time we did not have the conversion kits, but they're out there, and we've done training since then, and those conversion kits are really something to see. We had mechanics on site. I don't mean to rush through this, but truly be involved in the Emergency Operations Center. Get in there, insert yourself in the process, because you are a valuable part of what's going on. And respect the boundaries. That's something that we learned the hard way in 2009. We had qualified personnel at the EOC after we got kind of through the first initial round. And do as many advanced written agreements as you possibly can with providers that can help you out with your task that you have. Take advanced training, do mock drills, and again with the shelters and respite locations, make sure that you identify the ones for people with disabilities, because not all locations can take people with disabilities. So for that, I appreciate you listening, and I'm going to turn it back over to Christy, I think. Right, Christy?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you also to Carol and Kevin. It is now time for us to take questions. I want to invite Stephanie to come back and give instructions on how you can ask your question via the phone.
At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. Again, that is star, then the number 1 to ask your question.
As we wait on the queue to build up there and people to alert that they want to ask a question, we did have a couple of questions in the chat section. Actually, there have been a few, and some of them have been answered by other participants, and I really appreciate you guys doing that. But the ones that hadn't been addressed, we'll go ahead and take one of those at this time. Eileen had a question about getting the list of people with disabilities from agencies like the DMV or the electric company, and I guess the DMV would not provide that, stating that there were some privacy issues. And so she's wondering about getting the list from the electric company, if that is something that's possible. I just want to see what your guys' thoughts are on obtaining those lists from other agencies.
Julie, do you want to talk a little bit about your self-identification process that you guys used? This is Carol.
Yeah, we certainly can. I honestly don't know if the electric company would provide that information. We relied on our own database, and we put that together with our local health department, and they had a lot of people that were not in our database, and vice versa. So that we have encouraged people since that time to self-identify with the health department, because they have the handle on all the HIPAA information, and that's how we have it set up here. I have not, honestly, myself tried anything through any other agencies like the electric company. I don't know, Kevin, did you?
Yeah, I was going to chime in on that. We haven't, at least in the areas I was working, we didn't go right to the utility and ask them for names, but we've done a reverse process where they'll do mailings. They'll insert a very basic document or questionnaire with the utility bill every month, and that got a lot of support down in Florida, I can tell you that. And then, of course, working with the health department, because they really understand the HIPAA issues, and that's still an ongoing legal matter. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Stephanie, do we have any phone questions?
No, at this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. Again, that is star, then the number 1 to ask your question.
We did have another question also from Eileen that I'll bring up since we're still waiting on some questions to come in. Julie, I believe she's asking about something that you'd mentioned She wanted to know the process that you used for creating your phone tree on the lanyard. And then also you had mentioned using an agreement that you had with private providers, and she wants to know if there's a sample that she might be able to use or some template that you have. And if you do, you can share that with us. But I thought you might want to let her know at least.
Oh, sure. Yes, absolutely. Well, the way we developed our calling tree was we have basically we have a long list of people that are employees in our organization. We identified the management level staff that would be first line front responders, and I have our administrative assistant type it up. She laminated it, gave it to all of us that are in management so that we had it. And then we also, the EOC, our emergency management staff up there, they produce a lanyard that has everybody in the city that would be needed to respond to an emergency. So we're also provided with that information. So it's a little bit of a redundancy, but it certainly paid off for me in that situation. And then as far as the agreement, our attorney did up just a simple MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, and I'd be happy to share that with anybody. I can send it to Christy, and Christy, you could distribute it if you want. It basically outlines a fee for the bus service that we would be requesting from others, and that we would have first dibs, so to speak, on when there is an emergency, we would be the first ones in line to get any support from that agency. And we have a couple of local school bus providers that we have agreements with specifically, so that worked out very well.
Great. Thank you so much.
This is Carol. And another suggestion for you for agreements is to go to FTA's website, the Federal Transit Administration, type in bus safety, and it will take you to another website. You do have to register for that website, but there's no cost. And on there are a number of different types of agreements for different types of organizations, and there are lots of templates, and those templates are free, and so that would be another good resource for you as well.
Good.
Great, thank you so much. All right, excuse me, Stephanie, any questions on the phone?
Not at this time.
Okay. We did have another question I'd like to present to the group. We'll give you guys another second if you do want to ask those questions on the phone. I had a question here to ask that we had received if we had time to address it. And I just want to see if you guys want to comment a little bit. If there's a community out there that hasn't yet developed an emergency transportation plan, what are some first steps that you might suggest to get them started?
Kevin, do you want to address that?
Well, I could start by, I guess, harking back to my original comments that you have to identify the proper people who are going to work with you to develop a plan. Other than that, I think I would actually defer to the transit subject matter experts and something like that, and I would hope that folks like yourselves would be sitting next to me so that we could develop a plan like that. I'm not aware of at this point where I am. I should tell the audience too, I just got to Chicago 6 weeks ago, so I'm kind of learning the ropes here. I had previously been in Boston and Florida, of course, but my experience really in Boston, we didn't quite have that yet. Chicago looks to be working on that. The mayor has an active office for persons with disability, MOPD, and so I'll be learning more as time goes on, and I could share that with folks in the future.
And here locally for Fargo, we are actually, it's our police department that spearheads that effort, at least for emergency plan, the overall emergency plan for the area. And then the partners at the table are transit, the health department, highway patrol. You go down the list. So I agree with Kevin, it's getting that group together initially, because the police have a particular role. Everybody has their own role, and it's stuff that you may not think of. Engineering is very, very important to have at the table. You want to make sure that all the players are identified and brought together first, because the trend is changing a little bit now about do we evacuate or do we shelter in place? Mm-hmm. And a lot of that that we didn't have time to talk about But they will be very up to date on stuff like that. And you can sign up for a lot of website information that I do so I can stay up on what's happening in the transit industry specifically. But it's identifying the players and getting them together is the main thing. And if there's already a group, insert yourself into it.
Yeah, this is Kevin again. I would add a couple of things. One, in terms of trending, what's going on in emergency management. One is the fact that FEMA has really initiated a program to regionalize plans. So, for example, when I left Boston, FEMA Region 1 was putting together a regional plan that envisions a catastrophe striking Boston or any other area in New England and having the regional response. And that's becoming a big deal no matter where we go. And transportation is a tremendous part of that, obviously. So I just want to mention that.
Good.
And this is Carol. And to let you know again that bus safety resource site on FTA would have some of that information for you. And the other thing that is real helpful is the Transit Cooperative Research Program called TCRP. It's part of the Transportation Research Board. And if you Google either of those things, trb.org or Transit Cooperative Research Program, I believe the number is 87, but I might be wrong about that. But if you do emergency management or emergency preparedness, there's a recent publication that has just come out last spring that does a real good job of telling you how to organize your community.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Stephanie will check one more time if there are any phone questions.
Again, if you would like to ask a question, please press star, then the number 1.
Okay, we're going to take one more question via the chat, and if there are no more phone questions about that time, then we're probably going to be reaching anyway. So the last question in the chat section was what happens when there's a widespread emergency and you have emergency service agreements with multiple housing agencies? And that question is from Kristen.
Can you read it one more time, Christy? I'm sorry, I missed the last.
Sure. What happens when there is a widespread emergency and you have emergency service agreements with multiple housing agencies? If you need clarification, we can ask Kristen for that.
Multiple housing agencies.
Julie, I think it goes back to what you were talking about, where all the nursing homes, in this case it was nursing homes, and she's talking about housing agencies, but where you had all of the nursing homes, each of them thought they had exclusive use of you. So what do you do if you have emergency agreements, whereas if it was just an emergency with that one nursing home, you could handle it, but when it's an emergency that requires you being available to everyone in the area, how do you handle it?
Well, the way we handled it was I made sure, first of all, that I was part of the group that did all this planning ahead of time and after, during all the follow-up. And what we did was we made it very clear as to what our actual assets were that we had access to. And so consequently, what the nursing homes ended up doing was changing their train of thought to should we shelter in place. They've done a lot of upgrades to their facilities, trying to put people in place because that has worked out better for them. So the agreements we had were only with transportation providers, and we had and have no agreements with housing units of any kind. So I would honestly, if it were me, I'd stay away from any agreements to be the only provider for transportation for, say, a particular nursing home or something, because you're going to get into a situation where if it is city, statewide, whatever the situation is, you won't be able to honor that agreement. So we don't, frankly, have any. We just have them with other transportation providers.
This is Carol. And one of the things that we ran into, I'm a former transit provider as well in a rural area, and one of the things we ran into that we learned actually from Fargo's situation, because I had multiple agreements with multiple nursing homes and senior housing facilities, is we actually wrote into the agreement that said, if you have an incident at your nursing home, this is our capacity to help you. However, if there is a community-wide declared emergency, we are not available for your exclusive use, and instead our assets will be controlled by the Emergency Operations Center. And that way you can be available to them. A lot of the nursing homes are under a lot of pressure to have that evacuation plan or some kind of plan in place. And so they have pressure put on them to have these kind of agreements. And so it's making sure that you have a caveat in your agreement that tells them that under certain circumstances you can be available, under other circumstances your vehicles are under the control of others or will be used for the greater good.
That's good. Thank you, Carol.
You know, that's another great benefit of planning too, and that's the fact that you know what you have and what you don't have during an emergency. I would refer everyone when they're doing their plan, refer to ESF 7, which happens to be logistics. And logistics, those folks, like in New England, I talked about a regional plan. I know that they have everything identified from dump trucks to buses to minivans, you name it, they have it, and that's the trend.
Yes, that's a good one, Kevin. We have a logistic here as well that's in charge of all assets. Yep.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Stephanie, I'm just going to see one more time before we end. Are there any questions in the queue?
We have a question from Cindy in Iowa.
Great. Go ahead, Cindy.
Thank you. I've enjoyed the whole thing. I've been active with emergency management through the Red Cross, and I'm now in a position of Director of Operations for Regional Transit. So this has been great to re-listen to and hear from new eyes for me in this aspect. The question I have is unrelated to that, and I didn't realize I'd go into this. I apologize. I was unable to log on. Can you get the slides from this at another time?
Yes, they're available on the event website. If you want to email me, I'll make sure you get them. Okay, perfect.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We have come up to the end of the event here. So what we're going to do, I'm going to ask you please to take a few moments to fill out our session evaluation. We do use this information to improve future webinars. It's a very short evaluation, so please take a moment. The link is on your screen right now. I've also entered it into the chat section, and it was emailed to those that registered as well. I know everyone wants to thank Carol, Kevin, and Julie for the really great information. I just want to check with them briefly. Do you guys have any closing remarks?
This is Carol. Just on behalf of Easter Seals Project Action, I want to make sure and thank Kevin and Julie for participating with us in this program. You know, your on-the-ground experience is what really makes a difference because you speak from practical experience and can explain to people exactly what it takes to make this work. So thank you very much on behalf of Easter Seals Project Action, and thanks to the participants out there for participating in the webinar. We'd sure love to hear from you if you have suggestions for other topics that you would like to have covered, or if you want to know more about this particular topic at a later date.
Great.
All right, thank you again, and I also want to thank the participants for joining us today. Please visit our website, which is projectaction.org, and your email for future Easter Seals Project Action events. But most importantly, thank you for your commitment to increasing and improving accessible transportation in your community. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes today's conference. You may now disconnect. Speakers, please hold the line.